And Pesach is upon us. What do we have? A Seder. So today I'll be talking all about the shoresh, Samech Dalet Resh. Shalom and welcome back to Hebrew Vocab Boost. Today I was going to do a video all about the shoresh Pei Samech Chet in honor of Pesach holiday, but I discovered then that there are only 3 words in modern Hebrew related to this shoresh. One of them is the name of the holiday itself, and 2 are verbs, meaning to skip over and to be skipped over. So not a very interesting video. So instead, I'm going to talk about the shoresh Samech Dalet Resh, which is the basis of the word Seder, which is our big meal that we have at the beginning of Passover. So for those of you who don't know, Passover is where we celebrate escaping slavery in Egypt, the whole story of Moses and being, all of the plagues and all of that stuff. And we celebrate the holiday by spending 7 or 8 days eating no leavened bread or anything that could. There's a lot of stuff we don't eat on the holiday. It's a little complicated. But we also, the first and sometimes the first and second nights, it depends on everybody's tradition, we have what we call a Seder. And that is a big meal at dinner time when we retell the story of how we got out of Egypt, and then we eat a big festive meal. It also includes eating a bunch of symbolic foods, and for me, I have very, very good memories of Seder. It was a lot of fun for me when I was a child. It was the one time of year where I saw a whole set of specific relatives, and so I always looked forward to it as a kid. And so I always loved going to Seder as a kid, but why do we even call the meal Seder? What does that even mean? Well, I was shocked to find out that this root shows up only once in the Tanakh. It is all over the biblical commentaries throughout the ages, but only once in the Tanakh. And so it shows up in Job 10 verse 22. And this verse says, Eretz efata kmo ofel, salmavet velo sedarim vetofa kmo ofel. And the JPS translates this verse as, a land whose light is darkness, all gloom and disarray, whose light is like darkness. So, a cheery verse, just what you'd expect from the book of Job. And so, los darim is what is translated as disarray. My interlinear dictionary translates this phrase as without any order, which is much closer to like a word for word or morpheme by morpheme translation. But so we've got our underlying meaning, order. So let's jump ahead to modern Hebrew, and there are a bunch of words based on this shoresh now. Words, phrases, all kinds of stuff. So we're going to start with this most basic word, seder, and it literally means order. It's a noun, it's masculine, and it means order. But the same exact word is also used to refer to the Passover meal. And this is because the Passover meal involves a lot of different elements. The naming of all of the symbolic foods, the telling of the story, there's the breaking of the matzah. There's all kinds of stuff going on in there, and it is all done in a specific order. And that's how the meal got the name Seder. Or as we usually say in an American accent, Seder. And we've got a few phrases, or sometimes in Hebrew it's just another word, but that are related to this word Seder. And the first one is beseder, which literally means in order. It's, it's just the preposition be attached to the word seder. And it means in order, but it's used to mean like okay or fine. So if anybody ever says, ma shlomcha, ma shlomech, you can say beseder, right? It means, oh, I'm good, everything's fine, I'm okay. And then there's a second one, beseder gamur, which gamur means complete or completely. And so this means completely fine. And this is one I hear more often when somebody is apologizing for something and they say, oh no, beseder gamur, it's completely fine, whatever it is you did. And then there's also a phrase, hakol beseder, which means everything is fine or everything is okay. And I actually prefer this one when somebody asks me something like ma nishma or ma ha'inyanim. Those are also phrases saying like, how's it going, what's up? And so, I don't know, to me, beseder sounds weird, even though I'm sure it doesn't sound weird to a lot of people. But, so I prefer hakol beseder. Oh, everything's fine in my life. And then we have the word kesidro, which is one word, but three morphemes. Ke, the prefix ke, means like or as. Then we have the Samech Dalet Resh, shoresh, which means, of course, order. And then the vav at the end is a pronominal suffix, meaning his or its. So this is like or as, his or its order. And it literally, that's what it literally means, but it's used to mean as usual. I don't hear it as often as karagil. That's what I normally hear for like as usual. And then we also have seder yom, which is an agenda. It's the things you are doing that day and the order that you will be doing them in. So now I'm going to quickly jump over to verbs, and then I'm going to come back to nouns. And that's because a lot of verbs have verbal nouns, the shem pe'ula. And so I want to mention the verbs first, and that I hope will make a little bit more sense. So our first verb is a PL verb, and it is lesader, and it means to organize or tidy up. We use this when we are, tidying up our room or our house. It can also be used with the bed, to make the bed. And then there's also a hif'il verb, lehasdir, which is in a way it's like to tidy things up, but not physically. They often translate this as to settle. And I asked an Israeli friend for some examples, and he said you can use it if you've got a lot of parking tickets and then you finally go to pay them all up. You are like settling your account, you're settling up there. And then he also said like it can be used to settle an argument. Often they also will translate it as to set things straight. So that's lehasdir. And then there's the verb lehistader, which is a hitpa'el verb. It usually means, hitpa'el verbs are usually reflexive. They mean to do something to oneself, or sometimes they're also like a passive. So one thing you may be wondering is, well, wait a second. How is this a hitpa'el verb? It does not start with lehit. And this is one of the things about if the first letter of shoresh is a sibilant. So samech, zayin, sin, shin, or even tzadi, which isn't exactly a sibilant, but it's close enough. The taf of the hitpa'el templates, and it happens in all of them, and that sibilant switch places so that the sibilant comes first. So that's how we get lehistader. So in a physical sense, you can use lehistader to mean like to work it oneself out, like if a situation works itself out, you can use lehistader. But I've seen it and heard it also with like to mean kind of almost like getting by. And I think of this in terms of when somebody's going through like a rough patch in their life. You can ask something like, "Ech ata mistader?" How are you getting by? Like, how are you doing? But it's definitely a different sense than like, "Oh, how are you?" Right? It's not ma shlomcha. I think when you talk about lehistader with a person rather than a situation, it's a really hard word to put your finger on what exactly it means or how to translate it into English. So I don't know, it's a weird word. If anybody else has, more to say on the matter, I would definitely appreciate it, because it's definitely not an easy word for me to explain. So, and lastly, verb-wise, the Academia has a pa'al form of a verb, lisdor, which they say means to arrange in order. And I think they specifically mean to arrange like in numerical order. Lisdor is maybe not so common a verb to use. I mean, how often do we talk about arranging things in numeric order? I don't know. I've probably never said that before in my life. And because Sin, Dalet, and Resh are all pretty much regular letters that don't generally drop out or give any problems in verb forms, they're all the Pa'al, PL, and Hif'il all have completely regular conjugations. The only one that doesn't is the Hitpa'el, because of the fact that Samech is a syllabant. Okay, back to nouns, and we will start with the Shemot Peula, the verbal nouns. And so the first one is Sidur. This is the verbal noun of the PL verb. And so this is like the act of arranging or organizing or tidying up. But it also means a prayer book. And this is because the prayer book has all of the prayers in a specific order. And so that's what we call, if you hear somebody saying, they're using a new Sidur, or I had to buy the Sidur that my synagogue uses, they're talking about a prayer book. And then the verbal noun of the Hif'il verb is Hester. And so this means like agreement or settlement. This is, basically coming to an agreement about an issue. This is like the settling of an issue or the settling of your bill. And Histadrut is the Shem Peula of the Hitpa'el verb. You can see that the Samech is still before the Taf. And this means the act of working things out, but it also means organizing in a workforce kind of way. So it can be like organizing or an actual labor union. And then we also have the word Sidra, which is a sequence or a series. And this is it can be like any kind of a series. I see it a lot when people are talking about a television series or a book series. And so, Sidra. And then we have two words related to typesetting. And they look exactly the same if you write them without nikud. The first one is Sadar, and the second one is Sadar. So they look the same, and they probably sound really similar if you are speaking at a normal pace. Sadar just literally means typesetting or composition. It's, organizing the typed letters on a page. And Sadar is a person who does that, a typesetter. And the female version of that is Sadarit. And a Sadran is a steward, an usher, or a dispatcher. So someone who keeps everything in order for the customers, keeps the customers in line, or the drivers. And a female version of this would be sadranit. And then lastly, on the noun side, we have misdaron, which is a corridor. And I kind of think of it as a place where all of the rooms or offices or whatever they are along this corridor kind of arranged in a row. As for adjectives, we have the word sadir, which means systematic or regular. So basically it follows a regular ordered pattern. And we also have siduri, which means ordinal, like an ordinal number. And then there's also, of course, mesudar, which means arranged, ordered, neat, tidy. And I wanted to take this opportunity to show you something about pealim.com. As you may know, if you have seen a bunch of my videos, I do love pealim.com. I think I mention it in almost every video because I love them so much. Their database is not as big as the Academia, but they are so much easier to use for an English-speaking person. So Pealim always writes with Ketiv Chaser, with the traditional spelling. So on the right, we see Mesudar with a kubutz, which is the 3 dots arranged in a diagonal line right under the Samech. But when we write without nikud, we write it the way it is on the left with a vav, as if it had a shuruk. But it doesn't have a shuruk, it has a kubutz, so that's why they don't want to kind of steer you wrong as to what is the proper way to spell it if you are indeed spelling it with nikud. So this is why you see it. This is exactly how you'll see it written. I just copied and pasted straight from pealim.com. This is how you'll see it when it has 2 different spellings. They'll show you with nikud in Ketiv Chaser, the traditional spelling, and then they'll show you how it's written without nikud. If you do not see a version that has no nikud on it, then that means that there is no change in the spelling. You just drop all of the nikud and you're good to go. But if you see this second form, then that's the one you should use because, of course, we're adults and we don't write with nikud. So if all of that is confusing to you, I explained it in much greater detail in a video that it's G4, and I think it's called Reading Without Nikud. Alright, that's it for today. Now you know most of the words and phrases related to the shoresh Samech Dalet Resh, meaning order. As always, if you have any questions or feedback, leave it in the comments. Hit like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe and press the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot bapa'am abaa. See you next time.